So in this screencast, I'm just going to introduce you to the basics of business level strategy before we look at business level strategy in action, if you like, in screencasts 4, 5 and 6. So I think I've already said this, but let's just state it again, that a business level strategy, the essence of it is that it's about competitive advantage or doing things better. And this is achieved by organising and performing value chain activities using distinctive competencies and resources. So let's bear in mind the VRIO network, the VRIO framework that we talked about last week, and the fact that resources and competencies need to be valuable, rare, inimitable, which means difficult to copy, and organisable, and that you use these distinctive competencies and resources differently and better for competitors to give you that competitive edge or that superior performance. So, in traditional business, what are some of the sources of competitive advantage then? So if competitive advantage is our goal, then there are two general routes to this. One is to avoid competitors, and the other is to be better than the competition. Now, thinking back to industry analysis, one thing that should crop up through industry analysis is you should be aware of your competitors and what strategic space they're occupying. So what market segments are they trying to serve with what products? And some organisations try to avoid competitors by identifying unserved strategic space. So by focusing in areas where there are fewer competitors. So they're developing products to serve market segments who are currently unserved or not that well served. So, and this does link in with Porter's 5 forces of, if there isn't threat of new entrants and threat of substitutes and the bargaining power of buyers and suppliers is low, that means that you're probably going to have a competitive advantage in that you'll be able to occupy a strategic space and charge high profits. You're not going to have to get into kind of cost cutting and price cutting wars, which are going to eat away at your profit margins. So avoiding competitors where possible is a way to gaining superior profits. Competitive advantage really means superior profits, superior return on investment. So clearly, from what we know about Porter's 5 forces, if you are in an industry where the competitive forces are relatively low because there's a lack of competitors, a lack of competitive rivalry, then you're going to achieve competitive advantage. Okay, so avoiding competition is one route to doing this. The other route is being better than the competition. And in some industries and some businesses, the marketplace is crowded. There isn't much strategic space. So if you want to operate in that market, you've got to do things better than the competition. And what Michael Porter, so this is Michael Porter's concept as well. So Michael Porter, who gave us Porter's 5 forces, also talks about competitive advantage and generic strategies for competitive advantage. And the generic strategies for competitive advantage, which involve being better than the competition, are two. There are two generic competitive advantages. One is that you do things, you organise your business so that you are more efficient and you have a cost advantage. The other route is that you do things differently to add features and quality and design for which customers will pay a higher price and this is differentiation advantage. So there are two distinct ways of being better than the competition. Do it more efficiently, so your costs are lower and you have a higher profit margin, yeah? Or do it differently and better, so that you can charge a premium price, and your premium price gives you your profit margin, your competitive advantage. Okay, so those are two ways of being better than the competition, which we're going to go on and explore in more detail. And in particular, we're going to look at examples in the sport industry for cost advantage in Screencast 4 and for differentiation advantage in Screencast 5. So, I think I've said most of the things on this slide when we looked at the diagram on the previous, but competitive advantage works in two basic ways. Avoiding your competitors by targeting that unserved niche market, or outperforming competitors through a combination of the 4 building blocks of competitive advantage, which allow you to become more efficient and control your costs better, or through things like innovation, quality, and customer responsiveness, being able to provide differentiated products or services for which you can charge a higher price. Okay. And so Michael Porter's research, when he produced this theory back in the 1980s actually, is that best practice and empirical research has identified 2 competitive business level strategies, which we highlighted on the previous slide: low cost leadership or cost leadership and differentiation. And successful businesses tend to use their competitive advantages and resources to develop one of these generic business level strategies. So what we're saying here is that successful businesses have developed resources and competencies, strengths, which allow them to perform certain activities and functions better than their rivals in order to pursue one of those 2 business level strategies. So business level strategy is very much a resource-based approach, which is kind of thinking about, well, how can an organisation internally develop what it needs to in order to be better than the competition or achieve superior performance. Okay, so let's just think about sources of superior profitability. So here we are talking primarily about organisations in the private and commercial sector whose goals are profitability. So a business can achieve a higher rate of profit or potential profit over a rival in one of 2 ways. It can supply an identical product service at a lower cost, and this is called cost-based advantage. So if we think about gyms, and we'll look at this in more detail in Screencast 4, if we think about gyms, we can say that Pure Gym, its core product, the gym, is comparable with an acceptable standard in the mid-market, but what it allows them, but their kind of cost-based advantage allows them to produce this at a lower cost and charge a slightly lower price, and by charging a lower price increase their sales volume and therefore generate higher profits. Okay, so that's the first way. The second way is supplying differentiated products or services in such a way that the customer is willing to pay a premium price that exceeds the cost of differentiation. Right? So there's no point differentiating something and increasing your cost so much that you can't make a profit. You've got to identify which things it is that a customer values and how you add value through your value chain activities in order to produce things in a way that allow you to generate a profit. And these 2 sources of competitive superiority define 2 fundamentally different approaches to business strategy. And what Michael Porter says, that you can either decide to be a cost leader or a differentiator, and you bend everything you do through your value chain activities to relentlessly pursuing one of these two generic strategies. Okay, the routes and the way that you do this might vary according to the industry that you're in and the activities and the services that you're involved in producing. But what he says, you've got to follow one of these two, and that firms and organisations that try to do a bit of both, a bit of cost leadership and a bit of differentiation, end up stuck in the middle. And that means they'll never be the cheapest and they'll never be the best. And that ultimately organisations either want, the best value premium product, the best differentiator, or the best cost, the cheapest cost at acceptable quality product. And that if you don't relentlessly follow either, you will end up stuck in the middle and you will fail. Now, when we come to look at gyms, I'll mention a chain of gyms called Fitness First. And if we'd been in the UK a decade or more ago, Fitness First would have been the biggest gym chain in the country. What happened to Fitness First was that it was essentially undercut by the arrival of the budget gyms, so it couldn't compete on cost. It couldn't compete with the premium end clubs. And what has happened to Fitness First? If we were in class and ask you this and say, how many of you have heard of Fitness First? When some of you might say, oh, I remember it. When was the last time you saw Fitness First Club? And you'd struggle because they've more or less disappeared from the market. They've stuck in the middle and they've ended up with business failure and market exit. They've had to sell off some of their clubs to budget operators to actually get out of the market. Okay, so and this slide just tries to kind of summarise diagrammatically some of the things we've talked about in the previous slides. So what we've got here is the strategic target. So we've got an industry-wide strategy, which involves kind of looking at the whole of the market. Here we've got to try to avoid the competition by focusing on a market niche or segment. So this is the strategic target. So you can either be a broad industry-wide operator or a focused niche operator. Okay. And the strategic advantage that you try to pursue is either a low-cost position or uniqueness, differentiation perceived by the customer. So here we have really an industry-wide differentiation or a cost leadership strategy. And down here, the avoiding competition. So avoid the competition. Porter defines this as a focus strategy. So you target a market niche or a segment and you try to serve that. You try to find a market niche where there is less competition. Now, it could be that over time, market competition grows for that particular segment or that niche as more operators see the viability of your business and try to get into that market. So over time then, an organisation with a focus strategy may need to start to specialise towards being a focused differentiator. So kind of charging higher prices for a premium product in that segment, or having a cost focus. So trying to charge a lowest price to serve that particular market niche or focus. But initially, a focus strategy is you identify an unserved market, and over time, to stay in that particular segment or niche, you may need to specialise as a differentiator or as a cost leader. But there aren't many examples of that in our industry, so we won't really cover that. But we will, in Screencast 6 today, talk about some examples of focus strategy in the sports industry. Okay, so that covers the introduction to business level strategy. And what I want to talk about to you next is the cost leadership strategy And I want to talk to you about that within the context of gyms, because this is the best example that we have from the sport industry. And I know that a number of you are looking at gyms and budget gyms for your assignments. So this should be particularly useful to those students considering this. But also others you could look at, okay, well, just as budget gyms learnt lessons from budget airlines, is there anything that I can learn from this generic philosophy of reducing costs, which would allow me to enable my organisation to operate more efficiently and to reduce costs?